Welcome back to China and the Hill, your essential weekly update on the U.S. China news and policy debates unfolding in Washington, D.C. and beyond. This week, we're here to break down the latest in U.S. China relations, including major developments following Presidents Trump and Xi's meeting earlier Thursday. Let's get into it. In Congress this week, senators introduced the Taiwan Symbols of Sovereignty Act, which would allow visiting Taiwanese dignitaries and service members to display the flag of the Republic of China while in the United States. The Counter-UAS Authority Extension Act would renew federal authority to protect sensitive facilities and assets from unmanned aircraft as drone threats continue to grow worldwide. A bipartisan resolution, Senate Resolution 463, condemns the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of religious minorities and calls for the release of detained pastor Ezra Jingminri and other leaders of Beijing's Zion Church. Other China-related measures include the No Alipay Act, which would bar U.S. persons from conducting financial transactions with the Chinese payment platform, and a bill restricting Treasury engagement with the International Monetary Fund to prevent the exchange of IMF assets held by the Chinese Communist Party. Separately, the Protecting Ballots from Foreign Influence Act would prohibit foreign nationals from donating to U.S. ballot initiatives and referenda. Lawmakers also introduced the Foreign Agents Transparency Act to tighten disclosure rules under the Foreign Agents Registration Act and the Restoring America's Leadership and Innovation Act to strengthen patent protections and bolster U.S. competitiveness in global innovation. Finally, House Concurrent Resolution 58 denounces the horrors of socialism, reaffirming Congress's opposition to socialist ideologies at home and abroad. In breaking news this week, President Trump hailed his early Thursday morning meeting with President Xi Jinping in South Korea as a 12 out of 10, saying the two sides had reached broad agreement on trade and technology issues. Trump told reporters on Air Force One that he plans to visit China in April, with Xi also expected to make a reciprocal trip to the U.S. later this year. The two leaders also discussed allowing the export of advanced computer chips to China, with NVIDIA reportedly set to begin talks with Chinese officials. Following the talks, Trump announced that the U.S. would cut tariffs on Chinese goods from 57% to 47%, having a 20% levy imposed earlier this year over China's role in exporting fentanyl precursors. In return, Beijing has agreed to suspend new export controls on rare earth elements for 1 year and resume purchases of American soybeans. Additionally, President Trump said that he would postpone plans to impose steep fees on Chinese-built or Chinese-owned ships arriving at U.S. ports. The Chinese government's readout urged both sides to avoid a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation and confirmed a 1-year extension of an existing tariff truce, but made no mention of specific trade concessions. The meeting came just hours after Trump announced plans to resume U.S. nuclear weapons testing, a move that overshadowed the summit and injected new tension into an otherwise conciliatory tone. In other news from the ASEAN summit, China and ASEAN have signed an expanded version of their free trade agreement, with Premier Li Qiang calling for deeper economic integration as a counterweight to U.S. protectionism. Li said closer cooperation could help overcome global economic uncertainties, and stressed mutual reliance between China and ASEAN nations as good neighbors and good brothers. The updated ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0, first launched in 2002, now covers over 2 billion people and aims to lower tariffs, boost investment, and expand integration across digital trade, sustainability, and small business development. Two-way trade between China and ASEAN has surged from $235 billion in 2010 to nearly $1 trillion in 2024, making them each other's largest trading partners. In other news, China's DeepSeek AI model is rapidly expanding across Africa, offering cheaper and more energy-efficient alternatives to Western platforms like OpenAI and Google. Huawei has partnered with DeepSeek's parent company, Highflyer, to integrate the model into its cloud and data services. By making AI cheaper and less power-intensive, DeepSeek is putting the advanced technology within reach of millions more people and enabling African startups to design locally relevant products. The model's open-source accessibility has led to its use in fintech, e-learning, and healthcare applications. China's technological footprint in Africa gives it a strategic infrastructure advantage. Backed by state subsidies, firms like Huawei, ZTE, and Transsion dominate the region's data centers, 5G networks, fiber infrastructure, and smartphone markets. While privacy advocates have raised concerns about Chinese oversight, many African entrepreneurs view China's low-cost, power-efficient AI as the most accessible path to growth. The Trump administration is urging Argentina to limit China's influence as Washington and Wall Street banks coordinate a $40 billion aid package for Buenos Aires. In recent weeks, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has reportedly urged Argentina's economic minister, Luis Caputo, to limit China's access to critical minerals and instead expand cooperation with U.S. firms in mining and telecommunications. Officials say the goal is to steer Argentina away from Chinese companies like Huawei, which dominate the country's telecom and internet infrastructure. Washington has made reducing Beijing's reach in Latin America a top national security priority, though Argentinian President Javier Milei has stated Argentina will not sever ties with China. Beijing has criticized U.S. pressure as a Cold War mentality, insisting Argentina should maintain its independence in foreign partnerships. And that's all for this week's edition of China and the Hill. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe to our new Substack for the latest updates, full transcripts, and bonus content. Link in the description. For more from the National Committee, check out our other podcast episodes wherever you listen, or visit our YouTube channel for in-depth discussions, interviews, and analysis. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.